depending on where you're on the globe, you can kind of do the math. So it's just exciting to have people from so many parts of the world involved in today's conversation. Lans, I want to just thank you again for your participation, for your time. I have so many questions I want to ask you, and I know we don't have a tremendous amount of time. So I just want to start off with exploring this idea of you being an interdisciplinary artist, and what does that actually mean for someone who doesn't know what that means? Can you give us a brief synopsis?
Sure. Thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, for me, an interdisciplinary artist literally means that I work between disciplines. So I'm not, particularly in one, medium or another. I'm actually interconnecting them. So, for example, if you see some of my signature hybrid works, you'll see that I actually will combine or fuse or hybrid a canvas with a screen, just as my way of talking about the interaction between real and virtual, or between analog and digital.
You have a microchip inserted into your hand, and I know this is something that you've talked about a lot, but I think for our audience today, maybe you could just take a moment to explain what does that actually mean, and how does that connect to your work?
Right. Well, it's a long story how I got to this project, but essentially, I was looking at, I've always been involved in technology. I began as a scientist, really, first in physics, then cognitive science. So I've always been sort of following technology. I worked in, digital agencies and, during sort of early days of the web, and also in a tech startup at one point. So I've always followed technology. Art was a passion, but it wasn't in my family the thing that one was allowed to do. So it took me a long time to get to it. But when I started working on art, it was very obvious for me that my artwork would have some sort of connection between art and technology, or would bring technology into art. So, around 2017 or so, I started looking at what was going on in sort of the blockchain crypto world. And I was looking at how some artists were using some of the blockchain and cryptographic technologies and things like that. And I wanted to push it as far as possible. And I discovered these microchip capsules that we can actually insert as a way of sort of tagging something. We use it also on animals, for example. We use it on our cats and dogs to tag them, at least in Europe. I don't know if it's the case in the US and around the world, but and I thought, I could repurpose this technology. And I actually found someone who was actually tagging a lot of people. So I thought, well, instead of just connecting one work to the blockchain, I would connect my entire artist self to the blockchain. And then I would connect that to every other work I did, meaning that you could literally see the connection. The code that I use in this work also shows up in every work that I do, whether it's analog or digital, whether it's a painting, which already my paintings combine analog and digital anyway. But basically, all of my works are interconnected. All of my works carry this code. So it's a way of proving, one, that it's my work. There's a sort of like tracking of provenance, tracking of where it was created, who created it. So there could be no doubt in the future that my work is my own, because it's literally in the code. So it was a way of but it's also a way of talking about a lot of other things, such as humanity and technology, right? So now some people say I'm a cyborg artist, because once you have some technology inside you, you're considered somewhat of a cyborg, right? So, and so the idea of this project at the beginning was just to connect myself and my work to the blockchain as a way of registering its origins. But then it grew from there, and I took this work to begin to speak about our relationship with technology, and then it became our relationship also with what's called self-sovereign identity. So our rights to our own data, our rights to our identity on the internet. And so I actually ultimately started creating other sort of additional projects linked to that. That's why it's called Network of Self. It's a network of different digital works, which are then represented as NFTs. But the main one is actually tracking my data, my personal data. And it's really strange. For me, I'm a very private person. But the main one is tracking my location and my data, my bio data, my vitals, heartbeat, heart rate, oxygen levels, how much I've slept, how much I've walked, things like that. So quite personal information. And I thought, well, I'm the person to do that. I am such a private person that I should really talk about data privacy. So to go the extra step of revealing that information, to a collector or to a group of collectors or even publicly is quite a big deal. But it's a way of sort of raising that these technologies. Cowboy Singularity is a work I did, for example, during it was actually during sort of the turmoil that was going on post-election in the US, and I grew up in the US. I live in Europe now, but I grew up in the US, and it was interesting I started working on that, but I didn't really know why I chose the cowboy as a symbol as the beginning. And as I was working on it, December, January of 2020, 2021, I realized it was really linked to what was going on in the US, the cowboy being such a symbol of America. And the idea of the singularity is like something that we cannot see beyond. It was first used for a black hole, but now we use it as the technological singularity, which is the point where artificial intelligence will become sentient, and we can't imagine what happens after that. So the cowboy singularity was sort of like a representation of sort of disappearing ideas or mythologies surrounding the US, and sort of the disappearing idea of what the US is, I suppose, and right. These changes that we can't see beyond, we can't imagine, the future is not so clear anymore, because some of the things that we were so holding on to, for example, stability in America as a foundation of our current society, our contemporary society, are slowly sort of withering away. So if you see the cowboy singularity, they start to disappear as they're riding away. Not only are they riding away, but they're also disappearing slowly. They're fading completely out of picture. And when you see it close up, you can actually see they're being replaced by a sort of grid. So it's almost like, something that is we associate so much with, very real idea of the cowboy, the rugged, the outdoors and all that. And then little by little, they sort of fade away into this sort of what looks like this technological landscape. And I believe the other one, I think, is Metamuse. Correct. Metamuse is basically a study in movement. It's a simple orchid opening up. And it's really just meant to be a meditative idea on beauty. And this comes from a series. This one happens to be black and white, but usually they're quite colorful and look quite simulated and hyper real. And I started with the image of a real of a real orchid, which I used to collect orchids. And there's something very seductive and alien about them, but then there's something very artificial about it as well. And the same goes for example, the synthetic muse. There's something very, you want it to be real. It's very seductive, but then you realize it's kind of cold and distant. And then the fact of being sort of encapsulated under this glass creates a kind of distance between that beauty and the viewer.
But I just want to say that it's always wonderful to hear from you. I'm excited about these works. I'm excited about the new projects that you have on the horizon, and I want to thank Show and everyone else with XVERSO for allowing us to have this conversation and in this forum. So thank you all.
Thank you everyone. Thank you, So, and thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.